we are going to have the honor this upcoming September and October to have Nestor Torres, the well renowned Grammy Award winning flautist here in the Central Florida region. And I am so excited, Nestor, to have you join us today to talk about the
Thank you.
importance and the impact of you playing with the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra. I mean,
Indeed.
like way overdue, right? Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited because we are in for a huge treat. We are going to have the honor this upcoming September and October to have Nestor Torres, the well renowned Grammy Award winning flautist here in the Central Florida region. And I am so excited, Nestor, to have you join us today to talk about the
Thank you.
importance and the impact of you playing with the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra. I mean,
Indeed.
like way overdue, right? How are you and welcome?
I am doing wonderful, Sami. Thank you for having me on your show. And congratulations on everything you have been doing. I love your podcast, and I love how you are so committed to doing the right thing and how you hold steady with your message in an all embracing, all inclusive dynamic. So I'm honored. The honor and privilege is mine to be here on your show.
No, so I think this is epic and huge. I just want to take it back a little bit because before talking about your background and your journey, right? With music and your beginnings and all of that good stuff and where we're headed, right? Moving forward, especially with the growth of diversity and the the how do you say, the multiple dimensions of influences here in Central Florida with music and the arts, really globally, right? I don't want to say it's
Yes.
just here in Florida, but you and I met, and I know that we were introduced through LinkedIn by a mutual friend. And when I got your message, I was like, "Espérate, wait a second. Is this like Nestor Torres, like the Nestor Torres?" So that
Yes.
to me was epic. I almost fell off my chair. But anyway, and since it's just been great to get to know you, and
Yes.
that you're
Well,
so down to earth and so really dedicated, right, to your craft and
mhm.
to wanting to collaborate with
Yes.
other musicians and really
Yes.
bring forth, you know, um, classical music and just the music from the Americas too, right?
Yes.
Not just European or US based, but really give new how do you say, zest, or bring in
Mm.
this different zest into arts and culture here in our region. And so talk to me a little bit about why the flute and how, right? Because I know that you're from Mayagüez, Puerto Rico,
Mhm.
right? And so then how were your beginnings and how did you fall in love with music?
Well, it was brought down, it's a bit of a legacy of sorts. I come from a lineage in that my father is a pianist, was a pianist, a vibraphonist, and also he is or was I like to, even when our loved ones have passed on, I still like to speak of them in the present tense because they're always with us. So Papito is also the niece of Ruth Fernandez, that
Mhm.
great Puerto Rican icon. She was known as El Alma de Puerto Rico Hecha Canción, for those of you who are not familiar with the name of Ruth Fernandez. And, it's interesting, Sammy, because I'm beginning to I'm answering your question about my musical beginnings and my love for music and the flute. And as I do so, I'm speaking of my great aunt Ruth Fernandez, and it just dawns on me that not only, and I'm getting goosebumps, not only did I inherit the music from Titi Ruth through my father, but her pioneering efforts as an Afro Puerto Rican woman, she was one of the first artists to wear her blackness on her sleeve and with proud. Another nickname for it was, yo soy la negra de Ponce,
Mhm.
and with she wore her su negritud, her race, with pride. And so that's funny. It's very profound at the same time. It just I love to tell the story of how Titi Ruth was the first black artist to walk through the front doors of El Casino de Puerto Rico. There was an orchestra called Mingo and his Hoopy Kids. We're talking about the 30s and 40s. And she was a teenager when she started with them. And she gives us a very detailed how she strategized it, but she actually walked through the front door with her head held up high, dressed to the nines with all the jewelry. A friend of her, of hers had this a Packard, I think it was the car at the time. She just, staged it so that she could walk through the front door. So many things that we so take for granted today, we definitely stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. There's no question about it. So that's uh, my beyond history with the music. And as to the flute, well, anyway, I'll stop now.
No, don't stop. So then how? Like when were you exposed to the flute or because I'm sure then with the family with such rich musical background, right? And
Yes,
and like a legacy, right?
yes.
You were
Well,
exposed to instrument like to so many instruments then, right?
that
And
is
so many
correct.
forms of yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but and to your point, yes, I was exposed to many instruments, and that was the thing about the flute. It was not usual. My father being a musician, of course, the first instruments were exposed to is uh, the drums, the piano, the drums. And so since I was a child, a bit older than a toddler, I was banging up on the pots and pans, and two cousins of mine will play drums. And Santa Claus brought me it was a professional, small little professional drum set when I was 5. And so I played drums until I was 12. Then in Puerto Rico, they have what is called 6 escuelas libres de música in different towns in the island. And Mayagüez, they have Escuela Libre de Música. My cousins were the first ones to join. And of course, as my cousins joined, so I have to join the, Escuela de Música as well. When I was not inclined to study drums per se. And so when the time came for us to go into the, fill the application, the part comes in, what instrument do you want to learn? And I started thinking, well, I don't know about the piano. And because I was exposed to the trumpet, the trombones, the saxophones, the bass, none of them really called out to me. And then as I looked up on the blackboard, well, wait a minute. I saw the picture, a photograph of the flute. So the flute was different. And that's what really attracted me to it. I'll try that. So when I went home, I was 12 years at the time and 12 years old. When I told my dad, he said, well, the flute, he said, well, mijo, if you're going to do the flute, to work as a musician, you also will have to learn the clarinet and the saxophone as a woodwind player, because in Puerto Rico at the time, there was virtually no flute tradition to speak thereof, as opposed to the
Mm-hmm.
music Cuba, con la charanga. There's like definitely a flute tradition in South America, with Andean music, música andina, the quena, the different kinds of zampoña and the flutes. And even in Venezuela, although it's relatively recently, for the past, I would say, 3 generations, great flutists began to adapt the folkloric Venezuelan music into flute, or incorporate flute into folkloric music. So we do have a flute tradition in Latin America and the Caribbean, but not in Puerto Rico. So, like, what do I know? I'm 12 years old. Yeah, whatever. It's like, but he said, if you're going to do this, then you have to really study hard. He then introduced me to Herbie Mann, to Jean-Pierre Rampal, and to I already knew about Orquesta Aragon, and I knew about Pacheco from my early, being a toddler. Papito had like records of Johnny Pacheco when he had his charanga, before he days, Tumbao Viejo and before the Fania days and so on. So that's how I came to play the flute.
And look where it's gotten you. Oh my goodness. Four
Yeah.
Grammy nominations, one Grammy nomination, one Latin Grammy Award.
Yes.
What? You've collaborated with Gloria Estefan, Kenny Loggins, Dave Matthews, Herbie Hancock, Tito Puente,
Yes.
Michael Camilo. I mean, the list goes on and on and
Yes.
on, right? And
Yes.
and how fantastic. And so tell me about your transition to New York. Like what took you there? Like what motivated you to head to the Big Apple?
Well, it was not so much me, but my family. Now, they tell me, I don't know how much of it is true, but part of the reason to move to New York, for the family to relocate to New York, was that uh, I was, I was a little too smart for my own good. So
Mm,
I jumped one grade in elementary school, and then I changed schools. I was in a public school, then I went to a private school, and I had more credits than I would have had otherwise. And so I ended up graduating at age 16. So I went to Interamerican University, El Poli le decían at the time, in San Germán, and because they had a good, music department. Interestingly, I never went to the conservatorio. I never went to the Puerto Rico Conservatory because I never really, in the, as newlyweds, my parents lived in San Juan for a bit. My father was working in El Condado and then doing television, so a cameraman, a soundman in television. But then there were some family issues, and we relocated to Mayagüez, where my maternal grandfather had a business. Otra historia for another moment. Um, so I am in El Poli, Universidad Interamericana, in their music department. And allegedly, my flute professor at the time told them that I needed to go abroad, that I needed to study elsewhere. I also feel that there were other family challenges going on, and it just was one collective number of reasons that in the mid 70s, then the family moves to New York. But I got to tell you, Sammy, I consider myself so very fortunate that my formative years were in Puerto Rico.
mhm,
It's not until I get to New York. I got there by the age of 18, whereas my
mhm,
youngest sister, Deborah Magdalena, whom I call the chief executive sister, um, she was 6 when she came to New York. So
mhm,
her whole dynamic, her whole cultural experience, uh, paradigm, framework, experiential is so different than mine. So
mhm.
I have learned to embrace that difference, but Omira is really, really different.
Yeah, night and day, but that's great, right? It's like this lived experience of having a foot in both worlds, right? And
Yes,
then
absolutely.
yeah, and knowing how to navigate that. And so this is very exciting. I know that you've been all over the world, played with all the like most amazing musicians and all of that. And I know that you're coming now, you're based out of South Florida, but you're coming now to Central Florida in September and in October, and you visited us, right, on and
Yes,
off. But this time to not only perform, for the community and also at Plaza Live, with the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra, but also in conjunction with the premiere of a documentary film of the Figueroa family, who also are very much entrenched in what it is to work in classical music, right?
yes,
And to
yes,
really uh, celebrate the composers that are of Puerto Rican descent.
yes,
It's tied into the focus series, I think, here for the
yes,
Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra,
yes.
as a special lineup for Hispanic Heritage Month. But I love that it's really hyper anchored in a Puerto Rican tradition, given that the largest segment of Latinos here in our region is of Puerto Rican descent. And so how did all of that come about? Because I know it was, a lot of twists and turns, and it's a whole process, right? With when you're working, with big ideas and big institutions, and then COVID, of course, right, didn't
Mm,
help any of us, right?
Yes.
So how did that come about? And talk to me about your relationship with the Figueroa family as well.
Yes. Well, there are three components to what we're going to be doing in September and October in Central Florida. Uh, First is you talked about the Figueroas. Regarding the Figueroas, since I was a child, I have been familiar with the Familia Figueroa, and they're a fascinating family. Their musical legacy spans three centuries.
Mm,
Um, from Aguadilla, the mother, the great grandmother, had a vision to teach their children music. I don't want to, take too much into go into detail, but um, by the mid 20th century, there were, six or seven or eight of the siblings of the Figueroa siblings deeply involved with music, and I include seven and eight, although there were five that were prominent because they were the five men. Interestingly enough, there were pianists and professors. There were three women. There were three siblings as well, and is not much talked about. But in any case, I knew about the Figueroas. I mean, they're royalty when it comes to classical music in Puerto Rico. They were the pioneers of classical music in Puerto Rico for Western European tradition. By the time that Luis Muñoz Marin came to power and he established the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, part of his vision was to expand the cultural dynamics or panorama of the island. And that's when he invited Pablo Casals, whose
mm,
mother is actually from Mayagüez as well.
mm,
Um, I mean, the preeminent, iconic Pablo Casals, a great cellist from Spaniard. He brought Casals to Puerto Rico. They established El Conservatorio de Música de Puerto Rico at the time in the early 50s. But by then, the Figueroas had already been doing tremendous
mm,
work. They already had their own, private, music schools in their own homes. They were already fostering a young generation of very accomplished, string violinists, string players, and,
mhm,
and pianists. So that's the thing with the Figueroa. What I know. So I have known of the Figueroas. So many, many years later, fast forward, um, I meet uh, uh, I meet Guillermo Figueroa. More about Guillermo in a moment. But now let's move on to the second component of my being with you all in September and October. Um, I remember that when I was coming up, I just had started playing the flute. I mentioned Orquesta Aragon. I mentioned Herbie Mann. I also mentioned Jean-Pierre Rampal. So already I'm having this jazz and Latino and classical influences. But I was actually a summer in Berklee College of Music in Boston. My mother, sent me there for like a high school graduation present. And in Boston, at Berklee College of Music, you could walk to this fabulous, record store back in the days when they had vinyl. And I was spending my $25 a week allowance for food and other expenses, all of it on records. So needless to say, I asked my mom, I need more money. She said, no, that's it. So I was eating a lot of peanut butter and jelly during that time. And so one day I'm going to, with a couple of buddies from the school, to buy more Herbie Hancock records. And I say, "Oh man, I'm so excited! Let me see what new things I can find of Herbie Mann." They started laughing at me. So what? What's going on? Well, have not you heard of Hubert Laws? And I remember Hubert Laws doing something with Momo Santa Maria. Anyway, I found his records, got him. Hubert Laws changed my life because here you have the consummate jazz flautist, but with classical training. And what Hubert was doing, he was the first one that did that in the late 60s, early 70s. He was bringing in the classical tradition into jazz. Works by Chopin and Bach and Stravinsky and Debussy, making them into jazz, and the level of technique and the sound was impeccable. And at that time, I said, you know what, I have no choice but to pursue, classical flute playing as a flautist. And so there began my love for classical music. Fast forward, I'm already establishing myself as a soloist in South Florida. I have the opportunity to perform with the Florida Philharmonic at the very, very, very beginning in Miami with James Judd. And I remember I played a movement of the Mozart Concerto in D. Then I played Di Corazon by Silvia Resach, which we're going to play in October with the Orlando Phil. And I played an arrangement that I commissioned of La Comparsa by Lecuona. Since then, I realized that at the time, orchestral music was going through a period in it's either the standards of Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, or very dissonant, avant-garde kind of works that were really not connected to the heart. And even then, classical music was going through a crisis period of sorts. And I felt, there's got to be an alternative. And I felt that in order for symphonic music to keep relevant and to become relevant to broader audiences, it needed to produce fresh works, but that were musical works connected to the heart. That had some sense of, melody and sense of appealing for works to be important, to be serious, but to be accessible to people. And so I felt that Latin music was a great important component of that. So that I took that on as my mission, on and off. My career went on more into jazz and to some Latin things later on. So on and off, I would do some classical work, but mostly on the pop music realm. So that was my motivation and my reason of being, with how should I say, my passion for symphonic music, but to bring the Latin and Hispanic elements of what I'm about into it. So now we go into the convergence part. With this passion of interest, in 2017 or 16, I meet Guillermo Figueroa, who happens to be a professor at England Conservatory in Boca Raton. And by the way, I hope you don't mind me that I'm being so detail oriented.
No, not at all.
You're opening this treasure trove of memories for me. Yes. So I'm a fan of Guillermo Figueroa. I mean, Guillermo Figueroa is a consummate conductor, unbelievably phenomenal violinist. He was one of the founding members of the Orpheus Chamber Ensemble in New York over 35 years ago, which was groundbreaking at the time because you had an orchestra with no conductor. And Guillermo was very much part of that. And presently, he's the music director of the Santa Fe Symphony Orchestra, as well as conductor of the Little Philharmonia and professor of conducting and violin in Boca Raton. So when we meet, we start talking, we get along famously. And Guillermo says, I'm going to commission a flute concerto for you. What? So he did. He commissioned another phenomenal musician from another phenomenal musical family, Mariano Morales, from Puerto Rico, to compose this concerto. It turns out that Mariano is writing this concerto for me, and Maria happens. So he had to, put down his
what you're talking about is 2017 Hurricane Maria, September 20th impacts Puerto Rico. Maria happens, yes.
And so, Mariano had to go and take care of his father, and there he witnessed firsthand the devastation and the horrific conditions of the reality of Hurricane Maria. That is imbued in the work, is imbued in the concerto. For it ultimately, has a hopeful resolution, but it was a very, very powerful piece of music. So I performed it with Guillermo in Boca Raton, in Santa Fe, and in Puerto Rico. And so it was. Now, let's go back to another part of the Figueroa, backtrack a few years. My mom was part of an organization called NACOPRO, or National Association of Puerto Rican Women, in South Florida. They invited her to the screening of a documentary of the Figueroa family. Okay, I'm going to take my mom, and I'm intrigued. When I saw the documentary, I was moved to tears. I was so, it's like, pero ¿cómo puede ser? How can it be that they are not known? And at that moment, I thought they need to come to Orlando because I know the Puerto Rican community here in Central Florida. That Central Florida needs to know. I need to do something to present. This documentary needs to be shown to the audiences in Central Florida so that they can see, and in the meantime, I'm going back, I'm getting kaleidoscopic here. I have been thinking of the Philharmonic Orchestra for a while, Orlando Philharmonic, because it makes sense. It's like how much of a Hispanic presence or support, or how much of a Hispanic audience was the Orlando Philharmonic catering to, and I thought that I could be a bridge towards that. But one thing that never really came to fruition until a series of acquaintances and events brought me to an invitation last summer at their final last summer, redundantly speaking, the last chamber concert one Sunday afternoon. It was then that I came into direct contact with the Orlando Philharmonic. As fate would have it, Jennifer Coolidge, which is the director of philanthropy, was in another lifetime a DJ, and she would play my music, so she knew of my work. And
That's
so the door
great.
was open, and the dialogue ensued, and that's how it all came together. And so it evolved to what we're going to be able to present now on October 24th at the Plaza Live as the first concert of the Focus series on the 30th anniversary of the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra, which is a tribute to Puerto Rican heritage. And it is a concert of Puerto Rican composers with an orchestra conducted by a Puerto Rican conductor who will also be performing the flute, the environment, a concertino for violin orchestra, and then a Puerto Rican soloist, yours truly, and performing a concerto by a Puerto Rican composer. Now, we have a couple of little things, because it is a Hispanic community. We want to. It is about the Puerto Rican heritage, but Central Florida has expanded and matured so much so, and I'm speaking of its Hispanic community, so that we wanted to do a little bit of an offering that is, not Puerto Rican, uh, but it is Hispanic nonetheless. And then we'll be, completing the concert with a very American song, because by a Jewish composer, and
Mhm.
that in the spirit of diversity. So that's how this came about. Now, as I'm getting ready, and these things are coming to be coming together, and I
Mhm.
received the invitation, and it's all wonderful. I said, well, this is the time. This is the time to present the documentary here in Central Florida, so that not only for promotional and practical purposes, the audiences get to become acquainted with Maestro Guillermo Figueroa, for those those folks that have not been, and so that they know and can have a taste of what to really experience on October 24th. But also, it is overdue that the Figueroa family is recognized, and recognized, beyond Puerto Rico, but also, within the Puerto Rican diaspora. And so that's what
Yes.
we're about. And so, yeah, and the Orlando Philharmonic is so gracious. They're hosting it. It is also part of the Global Peace Film Festival. It's really special. Óyeme, be careful with the questions you ask, because, they así give you like this much.
No, so yeah, when you called me and told me that you had a date of October 24th, I was just so happy that it finally came to fruition. But then when we met a couple of weeks ago when you were in town, and then you told me about that a month prior, actually 3 weeks prior, or five, no, 5 weeks prior, that on September 18th, that we're going to actually have, you performing at the Lutheran Church in downtown, right? And so,
Mhm.
for the community, free of charge. That's epic. And then
Mhm.
that same day in the evening at Plaza Live, we're gonna, do the screening of the Familia Figueroa's documentary, also, free of access. So the community can come, everybody, not just the Puerto Rican community, but everybody in
Exactly.
the community
Absolutely.
can come.
Absolutely.
I just felt that was so, I get emotional just talking about it, because
Mhm.
September 18th is just 2 days away from the 5th year remembrance of Hurricane Maria.
Yes.
So there's like this common thread, right? In this
Hmm.
whole thing. And I mean, you can't even make this up, right? The
Hmm.
serendipity of it all, right? That,
Yes.
all of this time trying to figure out ways to engage with the Philharmonic and also bring to the forefront the story of the Figueroa family, right? To a place of recognition and acknowledgement where it should be, right?
Yes.
And then all of this just happening during this time frame that just so happens to be, at a time where we're going to look back to 5 years. It's like a, remembrance of the tragedy, right? And the
Mhm.
trials and tribulations, but trying to offer up hope,
Yes.
and also this understanding that, yeah, we're part of La Diaspora right here in Central Florida, but here's our tradition, right? And
Yeah.
bringing it here and being able to share it with everybody. I think that's like some real powerful stuff, right? And I'm
Mm.
just so happy to have a front seat to witness it all, right? And to now call you mi amigo, mi hermano,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I just can't wait. And so, just the numbers, the sheer numbers are huge, right? Latinos here in the county where we're going to celebrate this are one out of every three people, right?
Mm.
The Puerto Rican community is 18%. We saw in the last decade the largest influx of the Puerto Rican community alone grew by 94% because of Maria, right?
Mm.
And so I know that as part of the lineup that you have composers that are of
Yes.
Puerto Rican descent, and just to know that the major, that like the highlights and the stars of the event are you and Maestro Figueroa, and that the Orlando Philharmonic and Jennifer and the entire team have put so much care into
Yes.
really being culturally sensitive, right? And
Hmm.
they're not holding any punches and trying and really collaborating and making this a unique and memorable experience. And so, how has that been for you?
It's been wonderful. And I'm going to answer that, but before I got to celebrate and thank you also for your kind words and really putting in perspective how important these events are. I just need to clarify that not only do you have a front seat, but you are like a protagonist of this because you have been so instrumental, in opening the doors and opening my mind and understanding to the true nature of the Central Florida community, and your example, has been truly inspiring in terms of that sense of commitment and that sense of compromiso. And especially, and I'm going to definitely talk about the wonderful experience I'm having with the Orlando Philharmonic, because you said, you have been talking and you have been telling all of us about how we need to be aware of the fact that it's all well and good to celebrate Hispanidad during the month of, between September 15th and October 15th. But, as Hispanics, we are here all year round in all phases of life. And so when you say, it's time to throw the maracas and talk about real equity, it's remarkable because not only is it inspiring and it confirms my sense of purpose and mission and focus, with all the pun intended. That here we go. Oh, interestingly, here I am honored to be part of the 30th anniversary of the Orlando Philharmonic's, uh, you know, experience as the first artist of their first focus series, in which we're able to focus on diversity and, in this case, in a Puerto Rican heritage. And what I'm so inspired and so excited and grateful to be collaborating with the Orlando Philharmonic is that, as you said, Paul Helfrich, Jennifer Coolidge, and Mary Palmer, Dr. Mary Palmer, they have all been so embracing and so gracious and treated us just, as they would treat, a European artist. It's just been wonderful. And prior to my participation, they already have been for I think a few years bringing in brown and black composers, artists in residence, soloists. The past artists in residence with an African American wonderful pianist. This year, they're artists in residence. These are also Afro Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's a mixed uh, raised kind of a brother. He's a phenomenal clarinet. Angelica Negron was a Puerto Rican composer that was their composer in residence. So they have been doing it. They have been walking the walk already. So by the time we come to work together, it's just so reaffirming that they just to speak candidly, that I'm not just a token artist that they're just having to fulfill some sort of image, for appearance. The Orlando Philharmonic is truly at the forefront of bringing change from within when it comes to diversity, when it comes to equality. And I gotta say, it is right. It's just everything is in place so that there's a real sense of equity being established there. And these are the terms that I have been learning from you, which is the reason why you're so part of this as well.
No. So, Nestor, I am so excited about all of this that we've just discussed. And I'm going to include in the post all of the information. If you're here locally, or if you want to fly in, I'm going to tell you something. You can't miss this, because this is going to be epic, like beyond. Okay. So September 18th, it's going to be the community coming together to really highlight, recognize, applaud, and acknowledge the Figueroa family through its documentary screening. And also you, Nestor, are going to be performing live, which is going to be amazing. And then the biggie, the big one, right? Where Maestro Figueroa and yourself, right, are going to be performing at Plaza Live with the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra on October 21st,
Yes.
24th. Yes,
24th.
on 24th. Yes. So we want to make sure that we pack the house. It's going to be awesome. And I don't know what else to say. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for representing us so well, right? And
Thank you.
for just,
Thank
I'm just
you.
so proud right now about
Thank you so
everything
very
that's
much.
going to
Thank
happen.
you.
And
And
it's
I,
going to be really exciting.
and I thank you also, Sammy, for your example. You see, the work of an artist is more meaningful than sometimes artists ourselves even realize. And so at the same time, it can be fraught with many wonderful highs, but very devastating lows. And it is not until, in my personal experience, it's not until we offer our art or align our art or talent with a sense of purpose and a sense of mission and a sense of service, that then no matter what happens, we are always be able to find a sense of fulfillment. And further, depending on our level of commitment and perseverance, we're able to attract kindred spirits and those who really receive what we offer as artists, rehumanizing the human heart. That's what it's really about. And so for me, it's great. I consider it a great opportunity to serve the Central Florida community, to contribute, perhaps maybe start making concerts so that I can eventually become part of the Central Florida community. And I thank you for welcoming me and to your show. Congratulations on the work you're doing. And that's right, folks, September 18th at the Lutheran Towers, and then at Plaza Live, yours truly, and on October 24th, that's a Monday on the Focus Series at Plaza Live again, where we'll be presenting a tribute to Puerto Rican heritage. Thank you, Sammy.
Thank you, Nestor. Un abrazo.
Igual. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.